Imagine waking up tomorrow, stepping outside, and the flag you know, the one waving proudly, simply isn't there. It never existed. The language tumbling from your tongue feels foreign, like a forgotten echo. The food on your plate? Unrecognizable, bland, or just plain absent. And that passport, tucked safely in your drawer, the one that grants you access to the world, utterly meaningless. This isn't some far-fetched sci-fi plot or a dystopian fantasy designed to spook you. No, this is the very real, chilling, alternate timeline we'd be living in right now if a mere handful of extraordinary individuals, 10 very specific humans, hadn't done something truly astonishing. They charged onto battlefields, faced down impossible odds, refused to quit when every fiber of their being screamed surrender, and in doing so, bent the arc of history to their will. Today, we're not talking about myths, legends whispered through the ages, or comic book heroes with superhuman powers. We're talking about flesh and blood warriors, real people whose wins, devastating losses, and sheer stubborn refusal to back down literally created the borders, designed the anthems, and forged the identities we now inhabit and often take for granted. We're tracing the documented chain of events, the tangible impacts, that put you, yes, you, inside the country you call home. This isn't just history, it's the foundation of your present. Seriously, think about it. What if the only reason your passport works, the only reason you have a home country to return to, is because some lone soldier centuries ago once charged through a treacherous mountain pass? Outnumbered 10-1, facing certain death, they simply refused to die. It sounds like something out of a blockbuster movie, doesn't it? Well, stick around, because number 7 on this list quite literally rewrote the map of a continent while suffering from a fever so high his own officers were begging him to turn back. These aren't just names in a textbook. They're the architects of our modern world. Number 10, Leonidas I. Let's kick things off with the guy who basically invented the world's first existential traffic jam on a narrow Greek seaside road. We're talking about Leonidas of Sparta, a king who, in 480 BCE, didn't just lead 300 of his finest warriors, but also rallied a few thousand allied Greeks to a place called Thermopylae. Their mission? To slam the brakes on the largest, most overwhelming invasion the Western world had ever dared to imagine. Xerxes' Persian army wasn't just big. It was so comically, impossibly vast, that ancient sources, perhaps with a touch of poetic license but certainly capturing the essence, claimed their arrows would literally blot out the sun. Leonidas's legendary reply? Then we shall fight in the shade. It's a fantastic, witty line, sure, but the true genius wasn't just in the bravado, it was in the profound strategic foresight. By holding that impossibly narrow pass for 3 agonizing days, he bought something invaluable: time. Precious, irreplaceable time for the often fractious, squabbling Greek city-states to finally unite their navies and prepare for the inevitable larger confrontation. When the Persians finally, inevitably crushed the Spartans, a sacrifice made with eyes wide open, Athens had already successfully evacuated its entire population. That breathing space allowed the combined Greek fleet to later deliver a crushing, decisive blow to the Persian armada at Salamis. Without that heroic, suicidal stand at Thermopylae, classical Greece, the very cradle of democratic thought, scientific inquiry, and artistic expression, the DNA of Europe, frankly, would have been erased from history before it ever had a chance to record a single word. Your modern Western ideals of citizenship, the very concept of a jury court, the catharsis of theater, the philosophical underpinnings of justice and reason, they all trace their lineage directly back to a king who knew he was marching into a certain death sentence and, with unwavering resolve, punched the clock anyway. He wasn't just fighting for Sparta, he was fighting for a future he'd never see, a future that includes you. His sacrifice wasn't just a military defeat. It was a profound victory that safeguarded the nascent ideals that would one day shape the entire Western world, proving that sometimes losing a battle is the only way to win the war for civilization itself. Number 9. Hannibal Barca. Fast forward about 2 centuries, and we're shifting our gaze to the sun-baked shores of North Africa. Here, Carthage stands as the undisputed superpower trade empire, its naval dominance stretching across the Mediterranean. Meanwhile, Rome is still a scrappy, ambitious upstart, a republic with grand aspirations but not yet the iron-fisted master of the known world. Into this volatile scene steps a 29-year-old military genius named Hannibal Barca. In an audacious move that still baffles historians and logistics experts today, he loads approximately 40,000 troops and, astonishingly, 37 war elephants onto ships. His destination? Spain. From there, he embarks on an epic, almost mythical march, traversing the formidable Pyrenees, and then, against all common sense and military wisdom, leads his entire army, elephants included, over the treacherous, snow-capped peaks of the Alps into the heart of Italy. It was an achievement so monumental that even with modern technology like snowmobiles, replicating it remains a staggering challenge. For 15 relentless years, Hannibal roams the Italian peninsula, a phantom menace Rome simply cannot shake. He wins every major engagement, humiliating Roman legions time and again. The most devastating victory? Cannae, where he masterfully executed a double envelopment, encircling and massacring a Roman force twice the size of his own. The sheer scale of the Roman defeat sent shockwaves through the Republic. Rome's response, however, was not to crumble. Instead, it reacted precisely the way panicked but ultimately resilient governments often do. It centralized power, streamlined its command structure, began minting new coins at an unprecedented rate to pay its legions, and passed a series of emergency laws that, ironically, began to effectively transform the Republic into an empire in waiting. In essence, Hannibal's relentless invasion, his very presence on Italian soil, became the crucible that forged imperial Rome. Without the existential threat posed by Hannibal, it's highly debatable whether Rome would have developed the centralized, efficient, and ruthlessly effective administrative and military machine that defined its imperial era. No Hannibal, and you might not have a Caesar, certainly not the Caesar we know. No Caesar, and the entire trajectory of the Roman Empire changes, potentially leading to no Romance languages. Imagine a world without French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, or Romanian. And crucially, no Latin law codes, those foundational principles of jurisprudence that still shape legal systems across Europe, South America, and significant parts of Africa today. So, the next time you find yourself stuck in traffic court, grumbling about bureaucracy, take a moment. Acknowledge the Carthaginian who, through sheer, terrifying military genius, forced Rome to invent professional jurisprudence and a robust state apparatus, just to keep its citizens from descending into utter panic. His legacy is etched not just in battlefields, but in the very fabric of our legal and linguistic heritage. Number 8. Richard the Lionheart. Now, the Crusades, let's be honest, often get a pretty bad rap today, and rightly so, given the brutality and religious fanaticism involved. But for all their complexities and tragic consequences, they also served an unexpected purpose for one particular nation. They forged the very first real, tangible sense of England as a distinct brand, a unified identity. When Richard Plantagenet, a towering figure both literally and figuratively, set sail for the Holy Land in 1190, England was, to put it mildly, a bit of a rainy, provincial backwater. Its nobles still largely spoke French, a legacy of the Norman conquest, and the concept of a singular English identity was still very much in its infancy, a patchwork of regional loyalties. By the time Richard negotiated the Treaty of Jaffa, a shrewd diplomatic triumph, and finally made his way back home, albeit after a rather inconvenient detour as a prisoner in Austria, which only added to his mystique, something profound had shifted. Minstrels, the media influencers of their day, had already been busy. They had spun tales of his unparalleled bravery, his legendary prowess with a sword, his audacious leadership. He wasn't just a king. He was the prototypical English hero, a sword-swinging, ransom-paying, ransom-escaping rock star of the medieval world. His legend, carefully cultivated and enthusiastically embraced, began to unify a nascent English identity, bringing together disparate peoples under a shared narrative of heroism and national pride. This burgeoning sense of Englishness arrived just in time for the drafting of the Magna Carta a generation later, a pivotal document that, in turn, became the foundational template for parliamentary systems not just in Britain, but across the Commonwealth and, significantly, in the United States. Whether Richard was a good king in the modern sense, a ruler focused on domestic policy and the welfare of his common subjects, is certainly debatable. He spent most of his reign abroad, after all. But whether he was a brilliant self-marketer, a master of public relations before the term even existed, is absolutely not. The English-speaking world's enduring obsession with due process, with the concept of fair play, with the rights of the individual against arbitrary power, much of that, arguably, starts with this crusading king. He intuitively understood that a catchy, compelling story, a heroic narrative, would always beat a boring policy memo or a dry legal decree in the hearts and minds of his people. His legacy isn't just in the battles he won, but in the powerful, unifying story he embodied, a story that helped define what it meant to be English, and by extension, profoundly influenced the political and legal heritage of much of the modern world. Number 7. Joan of Arc. Picture this. It's the 15th century, and France is on its knees. They've been losing the 100 Years' War for an agonizing 90 straight years. Paris, the proud capital, is occupied by the English. The Dauphin, the rightful heir to the French throne, is so demoralized and desperate he's seriously contemplating fleeing to Spain, abandoning his claim entirely. The very idea of France as a cohesive nation seems on the verge of extinction, a mere collection of broken territories. And then, into this abyss of despair, steps an improbable figure, a teenage peasant girl from a small village, uneducated, untraveled, and completely without military experience. She claims to hear voices, divine messages, insisting that God himself has personally booked her an army. Against all logic, against the ridicule of courtiers and the skepticism of hardened generals, she somehow convinces the Dauphin to give her a chance. And what happens next is nothing short of miraculous. Within a breathtaking 12 months, this young woman, Joan of Arc, leads the French forces to lift the seemingly impregnable siege of Orléans, a victory that completely reverses the tide of the war. She then escorts the hesitant Dauphin through enemy territory to Reims, ensuring his coronation as Charles VII, a symbolic act that re-legitimized French sovereignty. What had been a dynastic squabble, a messy conflict over inherited titles, was suddenly transformed by her into a national crusade, a fight for the very soul of France. Her story, however, takes a tragic turn. The English eventually capture her, subject her to a politically motivated trial, and, in a horrifying act, burn her at the stake as a heretic. But in doing so, they commit a colossal blunder. They accidentally create the first genuine, powerful French martyr. Her death, far from silencing the French, galvanized a population that previously couldn't even agree on bread prices, let alone the abstract concept of national borders or shared identity. Her sacrifice ignited a fierce, unifying patriotism. By 1453, just 2 decades after her death, France had pushed England out of virtually all its continental possessions, retaining only the port of Calais. The concept of France irrevocably shifted from a fragmented patchwork of semi-independent dukedoms and feudal territories into a centralized, unified nation-state with a distinct national consciousness. Joan's short, blazing life is the reason modern France speaks French, not Anglo-Norman, and why the familiar hexagon on the European map is even a thing, a testament to the power of belief, courage, and the unwavering spirit of a single, extraordinary young woman who refused to let her country die. Number 6. William Wallace. Meanwhile, far to the north, Beyond the ancient Roman demarcation of Hadrian's Wall, Scotland was embroiled in what could only be described as a brutally messy divorce with its powerful southern neighbour, England. The late 13th century saw King Edward I of England, often called Longshanks, or the Hammer of the Scots, aggressively asserting his dominion over Scotland, installing English officials and demanding fealty. In 1297, a spark ignited the tinderbox of Scottish resentment. A relatively obscure figure named William Wallace, a man of fierce independence and unyielding spirit, killed the local English sheriff in Lionheart. This act wasn't just a personal vendetta, it was a defiant declaration, and it swiftly sparked a widespread peasant revolt that swept across the Scottish lowlands. Wallace, demonstrating a raw, untutored military genius, led his ragtag army of commoners to an astonishing victory at Stirling Bridge. There, he outmaneuvered and wiped out a far larger, better-equipped English army, utilizing the medieval equivalent of a choke-point ambush. A brilliant tactical move that exploited the narrowness of the bridge to neutralize the English cavalry advantage. This wasn't just a battle, it was a profound psychological victory, proving that the English were not invincible. Though Edward Longshanks eventually captured and brutally executed Wallace, displaying his quartered body as a warning, the momentum Wallace had initiated was unstoppable. His martyrdom became a rallying cry, fueling the resistance and ultimately forcing England to recognize Scottish independence under the leadership of Robert the Bruce. Fast forward 4 centuries to 1707. When England and Scotland finally negotiated the Act of Union, it wasn't a subjugation. Crucially, they did so as legal equals, two distinct nations coming together, not as conqueror and subject. This critical distinction, born from centuries of fierce Scottish resistance ignited by figures like Wallace, ensured that the Act of Union preserved Scottish legal, religious, and educational institutions. These distinct institutions are precisely what still separates Scotland from the rest of the UK today, maintaining a unique cultural and administrative identity. Without Wallace's bloody footprints, without his uncompromising stand against tyranny, it's entirely plausible that the Scottish Parliament building in Edinburgh might well be nothing more than a parking lot today. His legacy isn't just a statue or a legend, it's the very distinct cultural, legal, and national identity of Scotland itself, a defiant echo of a warrior who refused to yield. Number 5. Saladin. Now, let's turn our attention to the vibrant, tumultuous crossroads of the Middle East in the 12th century. The Crusader states, established by European invaders decades earlier, clung precariously to the Levant, a constant source of friction and conflict. The Muslim world, meanwhile, was often fractured, a collection of competing emirs and sultans. But in 1187, a formidable figure emerged from this political landscape, Sultan Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, known to the West as Saladin. He achieved what many thought impossible, recapturing Jerusalem from the Crusaders, and in doing so, unified Egypt, Syria, and Mesopotamia under a single, powerful banner for the first time since the early Islamic caliphates. While his military prowess and the effectiveness of his siege engines were undeniable, Saladin's true genius wasn't just in his conquests, it was in the enlightened diplomacy that followed. Unlike many conquerors of his era, he didn't unleash a massacre. Instead, he allowed Christian pilgrims to remain in Jerusalem, granted them safe passage, and negotiated terms for the Latin soldiers to depart. This policy of measured mercy and strategic tolerance wasn't just an anomaly. It set a profound tone for Muslim-Christian coexistence in the region, fostering an environment that allowed the Levant to remain commercially and culturally vibrant for centuries. The impact of Saladin's leadership reverberates even today. Modern Syria and Egypt still proudly invoke Saladin's eagle on their coats of arms, a powerful symbol of unity, strength, and national identity. His approach to governance, his policy of integrating diverse populations and exercising clemency, even in victory, became a template for the successful functioning of multi-sect states like Lebanon and Jordan. So, the next time you hear someone claim, with a sweeping generalization, that the Middle East has always been at war, perhaps remind them of Saladin. Remind them that the warrior who decisively kicked the Crusaders out of Jerusalem was also the same enlightened leader who, upon hearing of his rival Richard the Lionheart's illness, sent his personal physicians to tend to the feverish English king. It's a testament to a complex, strategic leader whose legacy extends far beyond the battlefield, shaping the very idea of stable, multicultural governance in a historically volatile region. Number 4. Akbar the Great. In 1556, a 17-year-old named Abul Fath Jalal-ud-Din Muhammad Akbar inherited a Mughal realm that was, to put it mildly, shaky. It was a vast, diverse territory, certainly, but fragmented, with internal rebellions and external threats constantly nibbling at its edges. Over the next 5 decades, however, this young emperor, who would come to be known as Akbar the Great, didn't just conquer everything from the rugged mountains of Kabul to the fertile plains of Bengal. He did something far more revolutionary, something that cemented his legacy and fundamentally shaped the Indian subcontinent for centuries to come. Akbar essentially invented what historians refer to as Akbarian synthesis. He recognized that ruling such a diverse empire, encompassing Hindus, Muslims, Jains, Sikhs, and Christians, couldn't be done through brute force alone. His vision was one of integration and tolerance. He famously abolished the jizya tax, a discriminatory levy on non-Muslims, a bold move that signaled a new era of religious equality. He commissioned the translation of ancient Sanskrit epics, like the Mahabharata, into Persian, fostering a cross-cultural intellectual exchange. He even hosted lively, often passionate interfaith debates in his palace, personally engaging with scholars and holy men from every tradition, seeking common ground and understanding. The result of this radical approach was a subcontinent whose elite culture became vibrantly bilingual, a place where Islamic, Persian, and Indian motifs seamlessly fused in breathtaking architecture, literature, and art. His administrative manuals, meticulously detailing governance, taxation, and military organization, became the enduring blueprint for later rulers, even influencing the British administration of India centuries later. When modern India adopted secularism as a fundamental constitutional principle in 1950, its lawmakers were, in essence, formalizing and enshrining the very principles of religious pluralism and state neutrality that Akbar had painstakingly road-tested and perfected over 400 years prior. So, every single time you order a delicious chicken tikka masala in Mumbai, or simply live your life in a diverse society without worrying about your religion dictating your rights, you are, in a very real sense, thanking the warrior emperor who proved, unequivocally, that diversity wasn't just a challenge to be managed, but a profound strength, a source of stability, and ultimately, profoundly profitable for a thriving empire. Number 3. Julius Caesar. All right, let's talk about a name synonymous with empire, ambition, and a truly epic story: Julius Caesar. Yes, he famously conquered Gaul, expanding Rome's dominion across vast swathes of Western Europe, and then, in a stroke of brilliant self-promotion, wrote the bestseller about it, Commentari de Bello Gallico. But here's the thing: his real, lasting nation-building, the kind that fundamentally reshaped the world, happened not just on the battlefield, but in the corridors of power. After his audacious, game-changing decision to cross the Rubicon in 49 BCE, a move that triggered a civil war and signaled his irreversible commitment to seize power, Caesar didn't just become a dictator, he became an architect of a new order. He systematically centralized the sprawling, often inefficient Roman bureaucracy, streamlining governance across a rapidly expanding territory. He standardized the calendar, introducing the Julian calendar, which was so accurate and influential that, with minor adjustments, it's still the basis for the calendar on your phone and watch today. Crucially, he extended Roman citizenship beyond the Italian peninsula, a radical move that integrated conquered peoples into the Roman state, fostering loyalty and expanding the tax base. These weren't just administrative tweaks, they were foundational reforms that transformed a Mediterranean city-state albeit a powerful one, into a truly transcontinental empire. An empire whose legal vocabulary, concepts like habeas corpus, subpoena, pro bono, still clogs modern courtrooms and underpins legal systems worldwide. When his adopted heir, Augustus, finished the job of solidifying imperial rule, Rome became the definitive prototype for every later empire that sought to justify its expansion with the noble-sounding but often brutal rhetoric of civilizing missions. Think of the British Empire, the Spanish Empire, the French Empire. They all, in some way, drew from the Roman blueprint. And perhaps Caesar's most pervasive, yet utterly unintended conquest of the 21st century. The very Latin alphabet you're reading right now, the letters on this screen. That's Caesar's enduring, silent legacy, a testament to how one man's ambition and administrative genius laid the groundwork for an empire whose influence continues to shape our laws, our language, and our understanding of governance, millennia after his death. Number 2, Genghis Khan. From the sun-baked plains of Italy, we pivot sharply to the vast, windswept steppes of Central Asia, to a figure whose name still conjures images of unstoppable power. Temujin, later renamed Genghis Khan. Born into a fragmented, warring collection of Mongol tribes, Temujin accomplished the seemingly impossible. He united these quarreling factions in 1206, transforming them from a loose confederation of nomadic warriors into the most efficient, disciplined, and terrifyingly effective war machine in human history. By the time of his death in 1227, his empire stretched from the Korean peninsula all the way to the Caspian Sea, an unprecedented feat of conquest that created the first secure, uninterrupted overland trade route connecting the distant civilizations of China and Europe. Yes, the Mongols were undeniably brutal. They massacred resisting cities, often leveling them completely, leaving behind a trail of destruction that still haunts historical memory. But their impact wasn't just about destruction. It was also about an astonishing, albeit forced, form of globalization. As they conquered, they didn't just destroy, they transplanted. Engineers, doctors, astronomers, and accountants were forcibly moved across continents, inadvertently kick-starting what scholars now call the Mongol Exchange. This wasn't just a transfer of goods. It was a transfer of knowledge, technology, and ideas on a scale never before seen. Paper money, the concept of passports for travel, and even the fundamental idea of diplomatic immunity, allowing envoys safe passage, all entered the Western consciousness via the sophisticated administrative systems developed within the Mongol courts. The legacy of Genghis Khan, therefore, extends far beyond the battlefield. Modern Russia, China, and Iran, among others, can trace many of their state centralization techniques directly back to the bureaucratic toolkit inherited from the Mongol Empire. We're talking about innovations like systematic census-taking for taxation and conscription, the establishment of efficient relay stations for rapid communication and travel, and the implementation of standardized currency to facilitate trade across vast distances. In other words, Genghis Khan is, in a very real sense, a reason you can deposit a check in your bank without speaking the same language as your banker, or why global trade functions with relative ease. His empire, built on conquest, paradoxically laid crucial groundwork for interconnectedness and administrative efficiency that continues to impact our globalized world today. Number 1. Alexander the Great. And now, we arrive at the top of our list, a figure whose name is practically synonymous with unparalleled conquest and a legacy that literally reshaped the ancient world. Alexander the Great. At the incredibly young age of 20, Alexander inherited the throne of Macedon, a kingdom that, while powerful, was still considered on the fringes of the Greek world. By the time he was 30, he ruled an empire stretching from the heart of Greece all the way to the banks of the Indus River in India. This wasn't just about military might. It was about a deliberate, visionary campaign of cultural dissemination. He founded over 20 cities bearing his name, most famously Alexandria in Egypt, strategically seeding Greek language, civic culture, and philosophical thought across 3 continents. In doing so, Alexander accidentally, or perhaps deliberately, depending on how you view his grand ambitions, prepared the ground for an astonishing array of future developments. The New Testament, the foundational text of Christianity, was written in Koine Greek, the common language that spread throughout the Hellenized East thanks to Alexander. The Islamic Golden Age, centuries later, would find its intellectual fuel by translating and building upon the Greek manuscripts preserved in the very cities Alexander had established. When Rome later absorbed the Eastern Mediterranean, it wasn't entering a cultural vacuum. It was walking into a world that Alexander had already profoundly Hellenized, a vibrant tapestry of Greek thought, art, and administration. The Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire that followed, and even the Ottoman succession states, all inherited and adapted elements of that cosmopolitan, Hellenistic blueprint. Today, from the bustling streets of Alexandria in Egypt to the historically significant city of Kandahar in Afghanistan, cities that appear in our news cycles almost every night, these urban centers exist in large part because a 20-something adrenaline junkie, a military prodigy, never lost a single battle and seemingly never learned the word retreat. His relentless drive created a vast network of interconnected regions, fostering cultural exchange and laying the groundwork for what we now recognize as globalization. Your globalized world, where a meme created in São Paulo can riff on Homer, or ancient Greek philosophy still informs modern ethics, arguably begins with that Macedonian king. He carried Homer's Iliad, annotated by his tutor Aristotle, into every single campaign, not just as a book, but as a blueprint for civilization, a testament to the enduring power of ideas, conquest, and an unyielding will to shape the world in his image.
Hey, if you're still with us and you're enjoying this journey through history, do yourself a favor. Hit that subscribe button and, crucial for future content, ring that notification bell.
So, the next time you find yourself standing for an anthem, feeling that familiar swell of pride or perhaps a slight awkwardness, or when you're grumbling about your taxes, wondering where all that money actually goes, or even when you roll your eyes at the seemingly endless queues and bureaucratic hoops of passport control, take a moment. Remember this. Remember that some human, probably hungry, definitely terrified, and absolutely exhausted, once charged a line of spears, or marched an army through impossible terrain, or stood defiant against overwhelming odds. They did it so that centuries later, you could live in a country, complain about traffic on a highway potentially named after them, and enjoy freedoms they could only dream of.
History isn't just a dusty book gathering cobwebs on a shelf, a collection of dates and names to memorize. It's a living, breathing narrative. It's the mortgage on the house you call a country, the very foundation upon which your present is built. If you learned something profound, something that sparked a new thought today, please drop a comment below and tell us which warrior surprised you the most, or whose impact you found most astonishing. And seriously, share this video with a friend, that one person who always claims history is boring. Because odds are, they're speaking a language, living inside a border, or enjoying rights and opportunities that exist solely because one of these 10 incredible people simply refused to lose.